What's up? What's up? Just wanted to make a video about leaving my religion. I grew up Christian, Christian fundamentalist, Christian Baptist, and I basically left my religion about when I was like 29, 30, somewhere like that. And I kind of wanted to just open up about it a little bit, you know, and my feelings about, you know, everything. You know, I was raised. My family was really Christian, especially my mom's side. Um, it was like a big part of their everyday lives, going to church every week, um, and kind of like raising us to be, really Christian and everything, like believing in Jesus and all that good stuff. And it was kind of like basically the main importance to my family is that we were Christian, we were a good Christian, and we believed Jesus, and you know all the kind of like typical Christian fundamentalist beliefs. And you know, most of my life, I did the best I could to kind of believe that and be that. Um, but there was always like kind of the two sides of me that kind of like doubted it, didn't believe it, or just felt like it was causing me a lot of issues, And so, for instance, you know, um, the ideas of like eternal torment and a lot of the Christian fundamentalist beliefs always kind of like fuck with me. And there was a lot of things that just seemed just not rational and just didn't make sense to my intuition. And also weren't compatible with what I actually believe. Like a lot of it was just me trying to force myself to believe certain things. Now there was certain things in the Christian belief that rang true to me, you know, that I didn't have a problem with, but there was a lot of things that just didn't. And um, I remember going to church and just it seemed like as a kid, before I went to church, I was happy, but then when I went to church, it was just constant like shame and guilt and fear. It was like when I went to church, I would just get um, a huge amount of fear, guilt, and shame and just negativity, and it was like really overwhelming to me, um, especially as a kid. Now, there were certain things that, like, felt positive, like seeing my family, seeing people I knew, in the community. It was always nice to see them. Um, Praise and worship was always nice, because it was like a celebration. It was fun, especially in a black church. It's upbeat, and it feels real positive, and you're giving gratitude, and I thought that was wonderful. But when it got to um, the preacher preaching, it just seemed like a lot of negativity, and and then and then it would go to just really dark and to me, and a lot of times I would just like fall asleep. I feel like it was my way as a kid of kind of protecting myself, because it was just like part of it was just, of course, you're sleepy, you have to get up in the morning, and you're tired as a kid. But a lot of it was just like I didn't understand it, and a lot of it was felt like a lot of negativity that I was sensitive to, and a lot of times. And then when it got to a certain point in the service, it was like a lot of focus on you're a sinner and you do this wrong and da 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 da, and you need to repent, and um, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe, and like you have doubts, you know, your salvation's on the line, and it was you know what I mean. I'm just basically just putting a little brief explanation, and it just felt like I was constantly absorbing that negativity. And before then, I was like a positive, upbeat kid, but it just felt like through the years that negativity was just wearing me down, causing me to be anxious, depressed, and I had a big fear of. I started to like accumulate a big fear of eternal torment because I would always question things just because that's always been how it was to question things. And when you question things, a lot of time in the religion, you know, it's kind of like you're questioning God. And then when you're questioning God, they wave a finger like, how dare you, kind of like you know what I mean? You're playing around with fire, you know, eternal fire. And so the fear of course, burning in hell for all eternity kind of just like really stuck with me, you know, and I believe it caused me to start to become more timid in life. I just was carrying that eternal torment, that fear of making the wrong decisions and not being straight with God, and you know, if I'm not, you know, perfect, I won't have God's favor, and God won't protect me, and I started to just overthink things, and just kind of made me crazy. And then, you know, I remember like how I would like obsess about the rapture. And if anybody's not familiar with the rapture is a time when you're taught Jesus comes back, and it's stressed like every time in church they hit you with the fear of like it could happen any moment. Jesus can come back at any moment. You could be walking down the street, you know, whatever, and you want to make sure you're right. You got everything in order because, you know, he's going to take all the Christians, all the real Christians, and they're going to disappear and go to heaven with God's army, and everybody that's left is going to be left with the devil in the end times, and you know you're going to it's going to be hell on earth. And so it was always this fear at the end of the church service that they would, you know, it was a way of, you know, kind of scaring you into like if you weren't saved to like, you know, get up at the end of the church service and say you want to be saved and say you want to be a Christian because you don't want to be, because it's like you'll go to hell when you die, but that's not enough. It's kind of like you could also be in hell when Jesus comes back. So you're like kind of like screwed because it's like damn, I could be alive and still be like screwed. So it's like it's fear to kind of like get you to, you know, fall in line. And as a kid, it worked for me, and it works for a lot of people that are, you know, brought up that way. And I remember, you know, like where I couldn't even concentrate on my schoolwork. You know, a lot of times, like the culture talks about ADHD, ADD, and stuff. And a lot of my not being able to pay attention was due to things like that. Like I would literally, I'm just being 100% truthful, and I know there's a lot of people that can relate to this that grew up the way I did. Is I would be in school, well, thinking like while the teacher's thinking, what if Jesus comes back now? And I'm having all these doubts about Jesus, and I'm not living perfect, and what if I'm not really saved? What if I think I'm saved but I'm not? And so I would have and Jesus could come back now, you know, and it could just be like anything, like like I'd be a kid, and you know, and there's so many things that they call sinful. So it's like you can be like see a girl and just be like, damn, like, you know, she's sexy or whatever, and you're 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 raised to believe like that's a sin and that can send you to hell. And so just simple natural things like that could make you think your salvation is in jeopardy, and you're gonna go to. And so if you really believe these things, it can create huge amounts of fear in you, and that huge amount of fear can create all type of problems, like problems with your immune system. Um, it could cause social anxiety because you always have this anxiety of, you know, and then also a thing that would like kind of fuck with me is every thought that I had that wasn't kind of like the right Christian thought, I was taught that it was like the devil, that was the devil. And so I was always trying to figure out, well, what's me? What's the devil? What's God? What's me? What thought is of me? What thought is of the devil? And what thought of is God? And it was just all confusing. And so a lot of my, you know, inability to focus were due to managing all these thoughts and all this confusion. And I remember being in school or wherever and trying to make sense out of things that, you know, now I look at as ridiculous. But like, how could, I would just be kind of thinking like, well, why, if God loved me, then why would he send me, you know, in eternal torment just for not, just for sinning and being an imperfect human. And so I would go, and there's so many things I didn't understand. So it would be hard to be in school and focus on what the teacher was saying, with all the heavy stuff that kind of like they would lay on me in church. And also it would be like you'd be in science class and they're trying to tell you about kind of like one way that the world is, and then the church is telling you another way. So it's like you're going every week to church and they're telling you God says Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden and they were talking to a snake. And I was, as ridiculous as it might seem to people that weren't brought up this way, I was raised to believe literally in Adam and Eve and a talking snake in a garden and a lot of things like that. So I was taught to kind of like believe a lot of very irrational things. And so life was very confusing to me. And then you go to church, you go to science class and they're talking about atoms and they're talking about evolution. And I'm like, evolution? Nah, everybody knows that Adam and Eve. You know what I mean? Because like since a kid, this is what I was taught to believe. And it might seem silly and crazy to everyone else, but when you're raised this way, and then they have the fear that if you don't believe this, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. Of course, a kid is going to side with the, the church, because it's like, okay, if I don't believe science, I get an F. But if I don't believe the church, I go to hell. So it's kind of like I chose the church. And so a lot of the times people think you're failing in school because you're dumb or because you have ADD and all this stuff. But a lot of this ADD and daydreaming is due to like psychological trauma. For instance, like a lot of daydreaming that kids do is because they may just be clocking out because of some stuff in the home or whatever, and so that they can't handle, so they clock out of it, or that they don't want to face, like maybe they're getting neglected, and so they go to pretend land to not face that they get ignored and that they don't get heard and stuff like that. So there's a lot of we just want to say ADD and all this stuff. But there's a lot of deeper stuff going on that I think we have to learn to acknowledge. And, anyway, moving on is once I kind of, I started to just be like, and a lot of time, and then I start drinking because I would have all these dreams where I would be going to hell, and I'd constantly have anxiety due to fear of, these fears that were kind of installed in me of eternal torment, and I would have all these fucking evil dreams, and and so I constantly just had anxiety of, being a sinner and a low self-esteem, because it's like, before that, it's like I had a good self-esteem, but then you hear a lot of like, you know, you're a wicked sinner, you're no good, and you kind of like, if you believe in Jesus is the only thing that kind of makes you worth anything. If you have, if you don't believe in Jesus, then you're so terrible that you deserve eternal torment. So a lot of this kind of can destroy, um, a person's psychology, a person's self-esteem. And then when you have a bad self-esteem, or you have a lot of anxiety as a man, that plagues you, because for like the more anxiety you have, the less attractive you are to, women. So then you get that problem, and so, you know, um, and so it just creates a huge amount of problems for you. And so eventually I reached a point where it's like, okay, my life is so horrible, you know, I gotta like stop drinking, I gotta figure something out. And I had to acknowledge that, I have to admit that I don't like my religion, that I don't like the God that I was worshiping, that I just feared the God that and I didn't believe in a lot of that stuff. And that was hard, to be honest, because I knew there was a part of me that would just be like, oh, but if you're wrong, you know what I mean, you're going to burn in hell. But I was eventually able to reach, a state where I was just kind of like, fuck it. This is what I believe. I don't believe that shit. You know what I mean? And so it was also an ego trip, because I had to like realize I don't know shit. Like in my Christianity, it gave me security, like that I know what life's about, that I know what reality is about. You know, it gave me a security. Oh, it was like, oh yeah, Adam and Eve. Everybody knows it. Like it gave you like a false confidence. And then so once all that was stripped away, I had to figure things out again. And it's kind of like, it hurts to be like almost 30 and realize you don't know shit. You know what I mean? And so it's a big ego trip. So that's another reason why I think it's hard for people to step away. And then you have to like kind of like, so it takes a lot of humility. And then I had to go on the journey of like learning and figuring things out, and kind of trusting myself, and actually believe in things that I actually really believe. And so I'd start to learn things about different religions, and and instead of just believing things because out of fear, or just kind of like a blind obedience, I looked at different perspectives, and I believe what made sense to me, what seemed like what made sense, instead of just believing something because the Bible said so. And then once I started, and then it also allowed me to release a lot of anxiety. When I dropped my Christian religion, a huge amount of anxiety just went off my back. That was just unbelievable. Like it was just like, oh, fuck. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so at first, the first kind of month and few months, it was difficult, because I had like I might go to hell. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm really, you know what I mean? But once I got through that, and then I was able to kind of like, instead of just believing things because I was taught to believe them, I believed things that were actually beneficial to my life. So I started to believe things that actually bared good fruit, instead of things that were actually destroying me and hurting me. And not to say there's not a lot of wonderful things and truthful things and great spiritual information in the Bible, but you know, but when you take in everything, there's a lot of things that are hurting you that you don't even realize are hurting you. And so, but when you separate from it, you start to realize, okay, this from the Bible is great and it's a benefit to me and it's true. But then you can drop the stuff that isn't. Like, okay, that's not true. That's hurting me. And so it's kind of like, and it also allowed me to read the Bible in a more rational position instead of just accepting it all. I could kind of like, it made me a better judge of, and then my life started to begin to improve, and I started to build slowly build a confidence built on truth and understanding instead of confidence just, a fake confidence and just because you believe something is true with all your heart doesn't necessarily mean it's true, and so, and then also allowed me, getting away from my religion allowed me to get in touch with my true self, because a lot of stuff was like, it wasn't really me. I was just being that way because I was trying to avoid hell, or I was trying to, I didn't want to be outcasted from my family. A lot of times when you separate from a different belief system, your family starts to look at you kind of like, oh, he's playing around with the devil. You know what I mean? Like, he's doomed, and then you just kind of start to have less in common with them a lot of times, because you're going into territory that they might be terrified of, or you're just changing. But it allowed me to kind of like start to get to know myself and be more authentic, because it was just like certain stuff that I liked, that I really liked, and my church would demonize it, so I would demonize it. Like now, a lot of the stuff, like the decoration I have in my house, would be like, some of this stuff would be demonized, like that's devil stuff. Anything that's not in the Christian kind of like paradigm, a lot of times is considered evil, and so, and a lot of times it would be things that I liked, like and so like things like simple things like Harry Potter, or certain things, is things that Christians will look at, that's devil stuff. Or even Ninja Turtles. Like, I remember playing with my Ninja Turtles as a little kid on the steps, and my grandma would be like, that's demons, that's devil stuff. You know what I mean? And I looked at her like, what are you talking about? Like, of course I didn't say that because, I didn't want to get the shit slapped out of me, but that's what I thought. And so I knew there was like a side of that religion that was just crazy, but it took a while for me to just be like, I don't believe that bullshit. You know what I mean? Now there's some of it, of course, that's great and it's not bullshit, but there's a large amount that, to me, that was. And so I able to be like, okay, I like these, and certain things it's like, because, Ninja Turtles are talking about meditation, Splinter's talking about Eastern things. So everything whatever is not Christian culture is demonized as devil stuff. So you become too very fearful of a Christian, as a Christian. A lot of Christians, they may not admit this, but anything outside of their belief system, a lot of times they're scared of. They could see something like a Buddha statue, and to them that's a false god, so they're like, I don't fuck with that. It could be, something witchcraft. I don't fuck with that. That's scary. And a lot of times they don't even know what things actually really mean. They're taught a skewed view of things. And so that's why I would see memes on things on like Facebook about Christians. They're calling Barbies evil, and to me, And a lot of the atheists, the people that didn't grow up Christian or Buddhist, whatever, they see that and they're like, how could you be like demonize a Barbie? But they don't understand the psychology of Christian fundamentalists. Like, to me, that's not surprising because that's what they do with anything that's not Bible approved. Um, they demonize it as devil stuff. And so they become fearful and angry of anything that's not um, um, Christian. So that's why you see Trump supporters and a lot of people, Christians, acting though crazy. It's because they have a lot of fear in them. They have a lot of guilt in them. They have a lot of shame in them. And they have a lot of fearful of any ideology or anything that's not, they feel is not Bible approved because, again, um, their God doesn't approve. And the Christian God is, like it says, he's a jealous God. It's very serious. Like, eternal torment is their punishment. So if you had that psychology, you'd be afraid of and angry at all these things too, because because your salvation is on the line. I'll keep it even like I'll keep it a buck too. It's like, a lot of times, like when I was Christian and I would see gay people or whatever, I'd be like, I don't fuck with that shit because everything, not because I really like had any hate for gay people. It was just really just to protect myself from my God that didn't tolerate that shit. You know what I mean? And that's how I was with a lot of different things. And there's a lot of things that the Christian God doesn't tolerate. So, you're like, I'm not going to hell. I don't fuck with that shit. Get that shit away from me. Whatever it is, whether it's like, anything that your God doesn't approve of, you like, keep that shit away from me. I don't want that in my vicinity because that's my soul you're talking about. It's not just like death, it's like eternal torment. So a lot of times, like, that's why people have to like have a better understanding so they can have a little more compassion towards Christians, because the reason you're like, if you believe what they believe, you'd be crazy like that too. You'd be scared of everything. You'd be mad at everything because it's a threat to your soul. Their consequences for them and a lot of their beliefs are eternal torment. So they have to kind of like push all these things away. You know what I mean? If you know what I mean. And so, you know, that's how it goes. So, a lot of it is due to fear. And people are not going to admit that it's because they're fearful, especially if you're a dude. You can be, oh, you know what I mean? But it is. It is. I'm telling you, because, like, I grew up in that hard. My mom's side is, like, hardcore, you know, Christian. So we grew up that way. And we have a lot of angst and a lot of fear. Um, and a lot of times it's like you think the fear we're carrying is maybe due to like no, it's due to religious thing, and so also a thing that I had to learn to do is I had to change my psychology, which took a lot of time. I had to get over my fear of hell. I had to get over certain things because it gets ingrained in your subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is what controls a lot of your actions. So I had to do a lot of things to reprogram my mind, so I didn't have all this fear, and I didn't have all this guilt, and I didn't have all this shame, and I didn't have all this self-hatred, because I had a lot of self-hatred because a lot of times the real me liked a lot of things that the Bible said was horrible. Like I liked the real me likes different things in different cultures, likes, you know, different belief systems and different ideas and stuff like that. And so a large part of me, the Christian culture, hated. And then so I learned to hate that about myself, and I wouldn't accept that. It took a while for me to accept, like, you know, some certain things that I like. Even that rug back there with a mandala on it. You know, a lot of Christians don't fuck. They teach you not to fuck with that shit. You know, anything I have that might be about like New Age shit. Like I grew up liking Peter Pan. I like a lot of these um, things that Christians considered heretic stuff. The real me liked a lot of that shit, but I demonized a lot of that stuff in myself because I'm not going to hell for that shit because that's how I was raised. So it takes a lot of time to reprogram your mind, but anybody that wants to go through this process, it's possible, and you can have a completely different outlook, and you can get rid of a lot of that fear and that shame and guilt, because a lot of times you're taught to having shame and guilt for things that's just natural biological functions. A lot of times Christians demonize, things that are just natural, and then so they constantly have to repent. Like I was like, you know, like I was used to be in a state where I would just like repent every fucking 2 seconds because it's just like, it was just like things that just are just biological functions you're taught that are like terrible. Like you look at a girl's ass and like there's that oh, you're lusting is of the devil, you're going to go to hell. So it's like you know what I mean. So it causes all these fucked up shit in your psychology. So you have a lot of people that have just all these different issues in all these different areas and perversions and things. It's like, look at the Catholic Church. Look at how they're constantly involved in pedophilia or all these perversions. A lot of that shit we don't want to realize, we don't want to face, is the teachings that things that the church teaches about sex and stuff that are just ignorant and fucked up. And they don't mean none of this shit. They don't mean it. It's just like people are raised a certain way, and then they raise their kids to think a certain way. And then when you're fucked up, they're not going to blame the church, they're going to blame you. So of course, but a lot of these perversions and these distortions in people are created by ideas that, and that goes for the good too. There's a lot of good things that the church teaches you, but we have to learn to separate what's terrible for us and what's good for us. And sometimes that means we have to face that the church isn't perfect. And that's a hard pill to swallow when you're raised, especially, to believe that the church is perfect and they know everything about God, and you know what I mean, and everything like that. And so, but I just want to anybody that's struggling with this, if you believe whatever you believe, you can just ignore everything I'm saying. But if you're a person that kind of resonates with what I'm saying, just know that you can change, and you can heal a lot of these things in yourself that the church has ruined in you. And there's hope, but you have to like face it. And a lot of people are not going to take personal responsibility for how their ideas may have hurt you, but that's okay. You don't need them to. You know what I mean? You just do what you have to do so you can improve your life, and you could improve your peace, and so you could learn and grow and have a better life. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I know this is like a very, you know, it takes it's a hard um, topic to even get into because you know um, because I know the Christians are going to get triggered by it and get upset about it. And then a lot of times you have the people who aren't Christian, but it's kind of like, you know, you can't criticize religion, you know what I mean, kind of thing. Or you're, you know, you know, they put a label on you and make it seem like you're a evil person for criticizing religion. And people always want to rush to defense of the of religious people, and that's okay. I get it, but yeah, sometimes you gotta like, you know, be real. You know, I believe in a thing. I forget the name of it, but it's like religious trauma. You know, and I forget what it's called, but religious traumatic syndrome or something like that. And I believe that's 100% real, and I've experienced it. But you can overcome all these psychological wounds. But yeah, it sucks, but it takes time, it takes courage, it takes you working on it, but it's possible. So yeah, this is going to trigger the fuck out of some of y'all, but hey, it's alright. It is what it is. Alright, peace out. Hopefully, you know what I'm saying, y'all might have gained something from it. You know, if you know, if you feel bothered, I don't know, I'm just speaking what I believe is true. I'm speaking from my experience, and I'm saying this shit because um, I had to figure this out alone, and I feel like maybe there's somebody that's going through what I'm going through, but a lot of people don't have the balls to express it because they don't want the church mad at them. They don't want to offend people. But there is a person out there or a kid that's suffering. Like I suffer tremendously. I feel like religion, Christian fundamentalists caused me a lot of misery. And so, you know, that's who I'm worried about. I'm not so much worried about you because you're triggered, you know what I mean, for whatever for reason. I'm worried about the kid that got psychologically fucked up and his life suffered because of it, and he's alone and isolated and feels like there's nobody that understands. And so I just want to put this out because maybe there's one person that can relate, and I'm just saying that there's hope. Um, you can find the courage to go on your own path, and then you'll feel empowered when and authentic when you believe what you actually really believe. And like I say, like I believe in God, so it hasn't made me like less spiritual. It's made me more spiritual. I just don't believe, you know, I'm not a Christian fundamentalist, but I believe in God, and I have my own ideas and concepts that I've learned from different religions, things that my dreams have showed me, different things like that. So I still am a very, very spiritual person, but I'm not enslaved by a book or another man's beliefs and ideas. Now, if you, everybody's in a different place in their journey. So if you are where you are, it's all good. Like I'm not. I love Christians. My family's Christians. I fucking love Christians. But doesn't mean I like all the ideas. So I'm trying to separate the ideas from the people. I love people. I love Christian people. I fuck with Muslim people. I fuck with Buddhist people, Jews, people. But I'll criticize the fuck out of the belief system, you know, because I value truth. And I'm not just going to let um, the bullshit slide because I don't want to offend anybody. I prefer, you know what I'm saying, like honesty and being real. You know what I mean? So, you know, I wish I never had to offend people, but it's just unavoidable. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Anyway, it's a long ass fucking video, but I just wanted to drop this. You know, peace.